Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Everyone's almost had their coffee. Hi. My name's Gavin Starks. I'm the Chief Exec of the Open Data Institute, and I want to spend a bit of time today just giving you some of the story of the last year, really. It's been quite a remarkable year. This is to set a bit of context, a tweet that Sir Tim Berners-Lee sent from the middle of the Olympics last year saying, "This is for everyone." And last year, we created the Open Data Institute. Sir Tim is our president and co-founder of the organization, and really looking at how can we bring data to the fore. I find it quite ironic that it's taken us sort of 25 years of the web to get to this point where we're now saying that data is a really big thing. But I really want to start with just being clear about some of the language that we're using here. You hear a lot of description of big data, open data, personal data, and there is some overlap in there, but I'd say one of the first things we have to do is get clear about what terminology we're using. I've been in many meetings with politicians around the world, with businesses around the world, where these three phrases are used interchangeably, which is quite terrifying, actually. So I'd really like us to get clear on what those differences are and work together on becoming clear about how we can increase the data literacy across the spectrum here. When we started last year, we were really trying to think about how could we use data to solve problems. And I think this is a real strength that I'd encourage everyone to think about is what problems can we solve, what skills do we need to bring together to try and solve them, and what data do we then need to support solving those problems. I was really heartened then when earlier this year, the G8 governments around the world actually signed an open data charter with a very similar theme of a new era in which people can use open data to generate insights, ideas, and services to create a better world for all. And I think this is a very powerful theme, and I'm just going to go through some examples. Just in terms of the team, we have Sir Tim and Sir Nigel Shadbolt here as our co-founders. Jenny Tennyson, I'd say, is one of the world leaders here in open data and linked data, helped to create Legislation Gov UK and Data Gov UK. And I'll talk a bit more about one of her projects later on. When I talk about open data for everyone in this context, I think what we're seeing is something, in some ways it's a little bit similar to the mid-90s web, where a lot of people were very excited about something, but we weren't quite sure what shape it was. The big difference is that the political system is really engaged in this sphere now. We've got the Open Government Partnership, which has over 50 countries now working on open government. Earlier this year, we had Obama give an executive order in the US that all federal government had to be open data and machine readable. To see the words machine readable in a presidential executive order, I thought was an astonishing thing to see. And we've got dozens of countries, hundreds of cities and regions around the world, all opening up their data. You've got the G8 Open Data Charter, which I mentioned. The World Bank also committed to opening up all of its contract information. But this isn't just about government. I mean, it's part of, I think, a global trend towards the Gov 2.0 landscape, but it's actually broadening. Commercial engagement is increasing. And we've seen at the ODI commercial companies like Virgin Media, like Rackspace, like Arup, Deloitte, Strata, Quanta Computer join us as corporate members looking at how can they not only consume open data to produce new businesses, but how can they also open up their own data? There's a real positive intent. It surprised me. I think it is surprising that we've had organizations come to us and say, we have all these data assets, we're not innovating as much as we could. If we make it open, how can we make it open to help a broader community engage with our own information? And the World Bank themselves have now funded an international program to train the world's political leaders and national leaders in their own open data strategies. So there's a real top-down piece to this, there's a commercial piece to this, and there's a bottom-up part of this. We've had thousands of people through our space in Shoreditch in London. We've got over 40 corporate paying members now. We've got a range of training courses. We've trained 130 people from 11 countries in the last year. And I think when I look at the people we've trained, they've come from a whole range of different places. We've trained people from Russia, from the Brussels, European Commission, the Cabinet Office in the UK, commercial companies, startups, and we've actually incubated 10 startups ourselves. So we see this coming from multiple directions. And when we think about, well, what's the impact of this, we could look at social value, we could look at data such as population, education, health, crime, housing. Some of the themes that you'll have been hearing yesterday and today around what is the benefit, social benefit to opening up data. There's also an environmental angle when we look at the impacts of climate change or supply chain security, the type of materials risk that's emerging. We can look at maps information, we can look at farming, we can look at water. This information is starting to become more and more available, and in the last month or so, there's a company in the US called the Climate Corporation, which was entirely based originally on open government data in the US. It just got sold for $935 million to Monsanto. Looking at economic value then from a government point of view, there's a huge commitment in the UK that was just announced a couple of weeks ago at the Open Government Partnership to open up all the corporate registries in the country. And again, this is part of a global move to try and bring more transparency to our governments, to our businesses, and help people build trust, I think, is the key outcome that people are looking for. How do we build trust with organizations that we're dealing with? And there you could look at tax information, peer-to-peer lending, procurement. Interestingly, in procurement, we've now embedded open data into UK government procurement rules. So there's quite a systemic shift happening here. So we're looking across these three areas. We're looking at social value, environmental value, and economic value. It's not just an economic growth argument. It's not just a social good argument. It's looking at all of those things together. Talk through some quick examples. If anyone was in the presentation from Mastodon C yesterday, they'll have heard this story about a potential £200 million a year saving for the health service by switching from patented drugs to generic drugs. When you look at excluding all the clinical differences, excluding all the clinical exceptions, where the patented drugs are required, just switching from one drug to another drug could save hundreds of millions of pounds a year. This is a project that we're trying to help them take forward, get funding for, so they can do the analysis across the whole range of prescriptions data in the UK. Interestingly, the NHS here actually releases all of its data on a monthly basis, so this analysis is possible. But the data set is 35 million records. Now, to some people in the audience, I'm sure that is a tiny data set. To others, it's a huge data set. But certainly to the medical professionals, it was too big to put on a spreadsheet. And that was the tipping point where they came to Mastodon to do some of the analytics work. So really great example of just bringing people together with the different expertise. Similarly, Open Corporate's another company that we're incubating at the ODI, has data for over 60 million companies worldwide. And they did this beneficial ownership map. And what you're looking at here is part of the corporate hierarchy for Goldman Sachs. And the countries are resized. You can see US in the top left, and the beneficial ownership to companies in Luxembourg, in the UK, and the Cayman Islands, as the countries have been resized based on the number of corporate entities in that corporate hierarchy chain. So you can see that most of Goldman Sachs' beneficial ownership is in the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg. Similarly, we worked with peer-to-peer lenders earlier this year, which is a £400 million a year market, analysed every single transaction. So this raw data did include personal data, but that we kept private. We then did the analytics and produced a report to look at the trends in lending and borrowing. Unsurprisingly, most of the lending is done from the southeast of the country, which is where the majority of the money is. But interestingly, the borrowing was pretty much uniform across the whole country. And what this analysis told us was that the high street banks are not fulfilling or not meeting the needs of a particular part of the market. The peer-to-peer lending market is fulfilling that need. So this can help inform policy. And we've been asked by the Bank of England to look at how could they look at this peer-to-peer lending market, how could they engage in a data-intensive and policy-light way of monitoring and regulation. Quite often regulation will come in with a big stick and kill markets. Here they're looking actively at how can they use data to catalyze a market. And in fact, the Bank of England themselves, that's one of the more surprising stories of the last year, have shifted to open government licensing for all their stats data. Used to be copyright, is now shifted. That's a huge move for an institution like the Bank of England. One of the first things that we did at the ODI was we launched a data-driven art commission, somewhat surprising thing, certainly raised a few eyebrows. We were really delighted with the response. We had over 89 responses from 20 countries in 2 weeks. It's subsequently been featured around the world at the main TED conference in LA, on the Wall Street Journal, and we've had thousands of people visit the actual works in our space. And I think what this told us, and it was a bit of an experiment to begin with, but the reaction to it has been really phenomenal. And what it's helped to do is it's helped to break data out of the kind of virtual space into physical space. Most of the artworks are physical kinetic sculptures, so people can relate to them in completely different ways. This sculpture here actually brings in live data from around South London near the artist's home and represents it back into a 3D scan of the artist's body. We also have a fairly infamous vending machine that dispenses snacks when the recession gets worse. So when the budget happened earlier this year, it dumps its entire contents onto the floor. So from the ODI's point of view, we're in this very privileged and unique position. We are here to catalyze the evolution of open data culture. And these words are very important to us. Open data has existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. There are many organizations, Open Knowledge Foundation, Sunlight Foundation, that have been working in this area for years. What we find ourselves in a position today, and over the last year, we've seen this coming together of the political sphere, commercial sphere, the NGOs, the third sector, to really say, how can we start to tackle significant problems? One of the things that we've created, and I encourage everybody to have a look at, is an open data certificate. This is a process which captures the metadata surrounding a data release. So you can certify individual data files. We capture things like the copyright information, the ownership, privacy details. And it's all open source project, all on GitHub. Please do get involved in this and start certifying data to help it become discoverable. The purpose of these certificates is to enable users of data to find the information, to understand what it is, and to have some sense of what's its longevity and how they can use it. We've had a phenomenal response to this. We launched it at the G8 Summit earlier this year. Again, slightly unexpected platform to launch a technology. But since then, we've had over 500 data sets go through the process. It's all free self-certification at this point. But we're getting this embedded now, as I mentioned, we've got this embedded into the UK government procurement process. So data as part of government contracts has to be compliant with an open data certificate. There are 4 tiers to this. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but we've tried to create a mechanism whereby people can start, enable their data to be discoverable, and then move through a process to make it more and more usable in a machine-readable form. And ultimately, Jenny and her team have set a very high bar for the expert level. I don't think anybody meets it yet, including us. But the point here is once you get into this process, all of the ambitions of linked data become realizable. So what we've seen is a global phenomena. What we've seen is ourselves as the Open Data Institute being really in a unique moment. You've had all of these different pieces come together over the last year, and it's really been quite an amazing journey. And a couple of weeks ago, we announced a new way of expanding the work of the ODI itself. We had phenomenal interest from around the world with people saying, how could they set up their own Open Data Institute? There were lots of initiatives in cities, in countries, in regions around the world. And how could we, again, catalyze this evolution? So we've created a thing called an ODI node. And this can attach to any business. So it could be a for-profit, any university, or any non-profit, and helps people connect. We've created 3 different levels of organization, and it's, I think, with the particular founders we have and the team, it was very difficult for us to think of anything but a many parts loosely joined network of organizations. So we've created these different frameworks, and I'm really pleased to say that 2 weeks ago we announced the first 13 organizations around the world, not just across the UK, across the US, across Europe, in Moscow, in Dubai, in Buenos Aires, Gold Coast, Australia. And these organizations are the existing communities who are trying to then amplify and connect with each other to tell the stories, give us the use cases, and enable everybody to come together around the open data agenda. So very exciting time, and I really look forward to hearing from all of you at some point. Please tell us your open data stories. Please come to us with use cases and problems to solve, and we're really excited to collaborate using our international network. Thank you very much.